The Xbox Series X Vertical Bar S is home to a litany of great games, from the biggest AAA experiences to smaller indie projects. However, not every Xbox owner out there might be willing or able to cough up the dough to get all the best titles. Thankfully, the console also offers quite a number of brilliant free-to-play games. Most of these are supported through in-game economies, urging players to spend money on microtransactions or implementing gacha mechanics that reward players with things like new characters or skins. But many can still be enjoyed for countless hours without spending a single dime, which is never a bad thing in the eyes of the frugal gamers among us. So, with such titles in mind, here are a few of the very best free games on the Xbox Series X Vertical Bar S. Defiant is Ubisoft's version of a first-person arena shooter. Not only was it developed by the company, but it also uses some characters and locations from its other games. For example, you can play as the likes of Libertad from Far Cry 6 and DedSec from Watch Dogs, as well as others. Within each faction, you have multiple classes you can choose from. They all have different abilities and traits, so it sounds a bit like Overwatch. Yet, the actual gunplay feels quicker, like Call of Duty. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is a digital card game based on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. As you'd expect from a title like this, there is a heavy focus on building and managing your deck. During games, your goal is to drain your opponent's life points, because if they run out, you win. That said, there are other possible win conditions too, such as a player running out of cards or forfeiting. It sounds simple, but this is a fairly deep card game with plenty of unique cards to keep things interesting. You can play against AI in the solo mode or go online to face real people. Several of the Fallout games have you escaping from nuclear survival shelters, known as vaults, to live a new life in the wasteland. Fallout Shelter is completely different, as it tasks you with managing a vault. So, instead of an RPG, it's a construction and management simulator. The main objective of the game is to keep your vault dwellers alive and happy. This means taking care of their needs and ensuring the vault is a nice place to live. It's pretty simple, but enjoyable. In Island Saver, you're placed in a bright, colourful world filled with beautiful creatures. This would be a perfect setting if it weren't for the garbage everywhere. Don't worry though, because you're equipped with a trash blaster. It looks like a gun, but it sucks up trash. So, you must wander around an island while cleaning up garbage and helping the animals. Along the way, you can enjoy the lovely scenery. To put it simply, the game is a low-stress and calming affair. Century Age of Ashes is a third-person multiplayer game where you do battle in an arena. That sounds pretty ordinary, and nothing to write home about until you learn that the game is mainly about riding around on dragons. Yes, it's a dogfight game, where you use dragons instead of ships and planes. So you must mount these creatures and fly around the map, shooting others out of the air as you try to win the game. In addition to having a unique premise, the game offers solid flying mechanics and exceptional visuals. Imagine a futuristic version of basketball where players ride around on hoverboards and the ball is giant. That is a good explanation of metaball. You hover around a stylish-looking track, pick up the ball and try to get it in the opposition hoop. There are some similarities to Rocket League, except it's based on a different sport, and you don't control cars. You control people who look cute due to the game's nice art style. It isn't a significantly deep game, but it provides a good time. There's no getting away from the fact that Stumble Guys is a lot like Fall Guys. The names, gameplay, and whole presentation are very similar. Yet that doesn't make Stumble Guys a bad game, as it's actually very enjoyable. Like Fall Guys, it's a multiplayer title, where you compete with a bunch of other people to be the last person standing. This means completing a range of challenges and obstacle courses, while avoiding getting eliminated. Along the way, you get to admire your cute, customizable character and the brightly coloured levels. Phantom Dust was a cult hit way back in the original Xbox days. However, more recently, an updated version of the title has landed on the newer systems and is free. Why it had a dedicated fan base on the Xbox is clear to see. After all, this is a unique and exciting third-person action game. In combat, you use your array of skills to take down the enemy. What skills these are depends entirely on you, as there is a sort of deck-building mechanic in this title that allows you to alter your arsenal of abilities. So there is a great deal of strategy in the game. Plus, the post-apocalyptic storyline isn't bad either. If you have ever played Minecraft and wished that it was set in a Fortnite world containing Lego blocks, then Lego Fortnite is for you. It's a survival game where building cool things is very much encouraged, along with gathering resources and defending yourself against enemies. The title has surprising depth and polish for a game that costs nothing. The way it differs from others in the genre is its inclusion of a community. You aren't forced to survive alone, even if you're playing by yourself. There are NPCs around that can help you, and you're encouraged to build a whole village instead of just a house for yourself. So it feels a bit less lonely than the average survival title. While it sometimes feels like every free multiplayer shooter out there is a battle royale title, that is not the case. The Finals is proof of that, as it provides a more traditional PvP multiplayer experience. Yet, it's only traditional in its game modes and structure. Overall, the game is very original and creative. For starters, it's got a distinct style. Instead of going for a more gloomy and realistic colour palette, the developers have made everything bright and vibrant, making it beautiful to look at. It's also nice to play, as the gunplay is very smooth and satisfying. Plus, the Finals joins the short list of games to have destructible environments, which are always a delight to see. You used to have to spend your hard-earned cash to experience this colourful title. Now Fall Guys is free, and it's just as great as ever. If you've never played it before, it's a unique type of online battle royale. Instead of your combat skills, it's your platforming abilities that are put to the test. How exactly they're tested depends on the round. You may have to race, play soccer, leap over spinning obstacles, grab tails, or do whatever else the game asks. The ultimate goal is to survive every round and win the crown. Unfortunately, in Vigor, your shelter is right in the middle of a harsh, snowy environment. However, you may as well do your best to make it as nice and safe as possible, which is pretty much the overall goal in the game. To do that, you must head into a public lobby and play online matches to acquire resources. The most interesting mode is called Encounter. In it, you're put on a map with other players, but you aren't forced to fight them. Instead, you're encouraged to search for resources that can build up your shelter. Of course, there are advantages to killing others, but disadvantages to dying. So, there's a real risk and reward type element to the experience. Just by the title, you may be able to guess what sort of game this is. If you guess that it's a game about warships, you would be right. More specifically, though, it's an online multiplayer title where you control a warship and battle other vessels. There are competitive and cooperative modes. In all of them, the vehicular combat is slow-paced and tactical. So, if you're looking for a simulation-type experience, then this is the one for you. Whether or not it actually feels like controlling a warship is unclear, because who knows what that feels like. But it's enjoyable to control these virtual ones. There have been many FPS games set during World War II, yet Enlisted is one of the only ones that is free. That isn't the only thing it has going for it, though. It's also different from many games of its kind, because you aren't just responsible for a single soldier. You have a full AI squad to lead. At least in the main mode, you personally control one at a time while ordering the others around. This isn't the sort of thing you usually see in multiplayer FPS titles. That uniqueness wouldn't be enough to carry the game alone, but thankfully the gunplay and visuals are good too. There are plenty of kart racer games out there, with Mario Kart being the industry leader. But if you don't fancy racing around a track as Mario or Yoshi, then perhaps you'd prefer to be a Disney or Pixar character. Disney Speedstorm has a large roster of characters, from Goofy to Stitch. Yet you will have to unlock them before you can step into their racing boots. The Disney and Pixar influence on the game doesn't stop at the racers. The tracks are also based on iconic Disney and Pixar locations. War Thunder is a multiplayer vehicular combat game. It isn't set in any specific war or time period. This allows the developers to include vehicles from many different eras. So, you can see things from World War II, the Cold War, and more. The types of vehicles you see are varied too. For instance, there are tanks, planes, and ships. This leads to many distinct battles and adds plenty of variety to the gameplay. Crackdown 2 might not be as good as its predecessor, but it's still a fun, open-world action-adventure game. You play as a super-powered officer who is tasked with cleaning up the streets of Pacific City. Those streets are filled with mutated zombie-like creatures and radical terrorists. Thankfully, you have a range of weapons and vehicles to help in your endeavour. Not to mention, your character has super strength and agility. It's all over the top and silly fun that is now free to play. While there are some great action RPGs out there, not many are available to play for free. This is what helps Path of Exile stand out. It's also a really good game set in a dark fantasy world. You play as an exile, and you're free to choose between different classes as you set out on your dangerous adventure. That adventure mostly consists of exploring caves and dungeons that happen to have a fair few monsters in them for you to fight in top-down RPG battles. When it was first released, Too Human wasn't the most beloved game. However, it wasn't a free title back then, so expectations were naturally higher. For a game that costs nothing, though, it's a solid action role-playing game. The story is particularly interesting, as it blends science fiction with Norse mythology. While that sounds like a very strange combination, it works quite well. The class system is pretty good, too, as there is a range of different classes you can choose from. Forza is the premier racing series on the Xbox consoles, but that doesn't mean it can't have challenges for its throne. One such contender is Asphalt 9, Legends. Being a free-to-play game means it isn't as big as the most recent Forza, yet it can compete in the graphics and gameplay department. This racing game has wonderfully satisfying driving mechanics that lean more toward arcade style than simulation. However, the visuals aren't arcadey, as the vehicles and environments look incredibly realistic. Destiny 2 was a game you had to pay for until 2019 when it became available for free. Now, you can experience plenty of the game's content without spending a single penny. And there is a lot of great stuff to experience in this online action RPG. There are PvP multiplayer modes where players battle one another, raids that you can take on as a team, seasonal events that regularly pop up, and more. Unfortunately, you will have to pay to play the main campaign, but most of the multiplayer content is available for nothing. Warlander is an online game that combines a few different aesthetics. It mainly looks like a medieval game, but there are also fantasy elements and even a bit of sci-fi. As with the aesthetic, the game doesn't stick to one genre. The title has elements of MOBAs, RPGs, and hack-and-slash games. Typical matches play out like large-scale wars, with many players battling one another. There is also a siege game mode, where you try to bring down your opposition's castle. Every mode offers action-packed fun. Omega Strikers is an online multiplayer game, where 2 teams of 3 take each other on in a futuristic sport. The sport resembles hockey in a way, because both teams are trying to get a puck in the other team's goal. Yet, there's no ice, and the players attack each other a lot more often than they do in the typical game of hockey. Plus, the players in Omega Strikers are very different from the average athlete you see in the NHL. For example, Juno is a green alien who fires strange blobs onto the playing field to alter the game. Every other player has their own unique look and abilities too. Overwatch 2 is a famous, and sometimes controversial, hero shooter. In it, 2 teams face off against one another in classic PvP multiplayer. It differs from plenty of other first-person online shooters because of its roster of selectable characters. They're a bunch of wild and wonderful individuals. Each one has a distinct look, weapon, and abilities. Plus, they each are assigned to one of 3 classes: tank, damage, or support. The best teams can blend these classes together to make one solid unit. In InOps, you play as a blob, which shares the same name as the game. As this strange creature, you move around different dark levels, avoiding the many traps in your way. Sometimes you're tasked with solving clever puzzles to advance. This occasionally necessitates transforming from a single blob into multiple, which you have the power to do when you want. Your overall goal is to find other InOps and get as many of them out of a level alive as possible. It makes for a fun 2D side-scroller. When it comes to kart racing in video games, everyone thinks of Mario Kart. The developers of Kartride Adrift are probably the same, as this game was clearly heavily inspired by the iconic racer. After all, you ride around colourful tracks as cute characters using special items. Those items are even contained within question mark boxes, like the ones in Mario Kart. However, the title differs from the karting title in that it's on Xbox, costs nothing, and allows cross-platform play. Dauntless is a free-to-play online role-playing game about hunting monsters. Each hunt involves you and a few teammates engaging a giant behemoth in battle. To take it out, you need to use your chosen weapon to whittle down its health, while making sure the brute doesn't wipe you out first. In between hunts, you can manage, craft and upgrade your gear. Naturally, the better equipment you have, the more powerful monster you can take down. Roblox is among the most famous free-to-play games on the Xbox Series X vertical bar S. It's very untraditional, as it's not really a game. Instead, it's a platform that allows users to build their own games for others to play. The community comes up with some really creative stuff too, as there are a lot of options when it comes to building. So there are always experiences to try. Plus, the many creative options also mean that if you're creative enough, you can make what you want. Warframe is an action-heavy RPG with fast third-person combat. You can make use of everything from guns to swords to special abilities to eliminate the enemy, and each mission typically has plenty of them that you have to wade through. But you don't have to do all of that alone. This game is a multiplayer title after all, so you can team up with a few buddies to take on a variety of missions. There is also an open world, spaceship battles, and plenty of customization in the game, so it provides a lot for a free-to-play title. Smite has been around for a while now, but it still remains one of the best MOBAs around, especially on consoles. One of the reasons why Smite has always stood out is the fact that the playable characters are gods and mythic creatures from different religions and mythologies. For example, you can control the likes of Ares, Bacchus, Cupid, Cthulhu, Loki, Medusa, and more. Each one has their own abilities that will help them and their team on the battlefield. This is useful, considering much of the game revolves around fighting in PvP team-based battles. The exact objective depends on the game mode, as there are a few of them. Each one involves battles of gods, though. There are plenty of Battle Royale games out there. Yet, not many entries in the genre are as adorable as Super Animal Royale. This is because, in this one, you play as a cute anthropomorphic animal. You can even customize the little fellow by combining different breeds and species together, as well as equipping them with cosmetic items. Yet, the sweetness ends when the games begin, as this is a battle royale after all. Thus, you need to use a variety of weapons to kill all the other critters and be the last one standing. The 2D top-down perspective of this game makes it stand out among others in the genre. Splitgate is one of the more underrated multiplayer shooters in recent memory. While battle royals and tactical squad-based titles are all the rage these days, this game stands out by attempting to bring back the fast-paced arena shooter. The game is somewhat reminiscent of classic Halo and Unreal Tournament. But it isn't just a copy of what came before. It feels original, primarily due to the inclusion of portals in an action-packed setting. They work pretty much as they do in Portal, and it adds a bit of variety to battles. For several years, Call of Duty, alongside Halo and Battlefield, dominated the multiplayer shooter world. This was before the likes of Fortnite and Apex Legends came along. Yet, the series has managed to stay relevant due to the original Warzone and its successor. For these free-to-play games, the developers took the classic Call of Duty shooting mechanics and combined them with the Battle Royale genre. It makes for an interesting and enjoyable mix that is a credit to the world of Battle Royales. Crackdown is not exactly a game designed for the Xbox Series X Vertical Bar S. In fact, the title came out 13 years before the console did. However, you can still play it on the system for free. And it remains a very fun game. It's one that doesn't take itself too seriously. You can jump to superhuman heights, drive wacky cars, and just generally cause chaos. All of these actions can help you wipe out the city's main gangs. Besides the sequels, there's not really been a game quite like Crackdown. PUBG is often credited with helping popularize battle royals, as it's one of the genre's best. Its basic premise is simple. Up to 100 players are airdropped onto a remote island where they must scavenge for weapons and resources while fighting each other until there is only one left standing. And if any of that sounds familiar, you'll have no problem seeing the breadth of its influence. The fact that the game continues to support a sizable player base 5 years after first making its debut on Steam Early Access and Xbox Game Preview speaks to its longevity. It only just recently transitioned to being a free-to-play title on consoles as well, making it a good time for new players to jump in and take part in some of its mayhem. Apex Legends is another free-to-play game that players can sink many hours into on their Xbox Series X Vertical Bar S. Set within the Titanfall universe, the game mixes battle royale and hero shooter concepts. Unlike the free-for-all nature of other battle royales, though, players are divided into teams of up to 3 squad members and must work together in order to take out other teams. Each player also gets to choose from a pool of 20 playable characters, with each one having unique special abilities that cater to different play styles. The game famously shadow-dropped in 2019, with very little fanfare before quickly growing to a player base of more than 25 million players within the span of its first week alone. For many years, the Sims series has provided some of the best life simulation games ever. And you can get one of the best entries for nothing, as The Sims 4 is now free to play. If you've played a Sims game before, you know what to expect. You create a family, buy or build them a house, and control their lives. This means tending to their careers and relationships, as well as catering to their needs. The Sims 4 comes with plenty of content to make that process as enjoyable as ever. Despite being free, Killer Instinct has always managed to rival the best fighting games on the planet from a pure gameplay standpoint. This is because the title provides very slick and well-polished fighting mechanics. Another feather in the title's cap is its visuals, as both the stages and the fighters look amazing. The only thing holding the game back from true greatness is a lack of content. This isn't a surprise considering the game costs nothing. What is there, though, is a lot of fun. Brawlhalla is another game that attempts to dislodge the monopoly that the Super Smash Bros. Series has over the platform fighter genre. And it does a good job of matching the genre leader, as the game provides fluid and frantic fun. As with most games of this type, the goal is to weaken your opponents and knock them off the map. Or at least that's the objective in the standard mode. There are several other game modes that mix things up a bit. Whatever you're doing in the game, you'll always get the chance to admire Brawlhalla's adorable character models. The only thing better than soccer, or football as it is called in the rest of the world, is soccer played with rocket-powered vehicles. At least that is the presiding logic in Rocket League, a popular sports game by Psyonix. It has players using their cars to knock an oversized ball into their opponent's goalposts, which sounds easy enough until you factor in its physics-based gameplay. The game has since grown to support its own esport, with a casual player base of over 40 million. And much like PUBG, Rocket League didn't begin its life as a free-to-play title. But now that it is free to download for anyone with an Xbox Series X or S, there is no harm in doing so and trying it out for yourself. Fortnite is one of the most popular online games across multiple consoles and even smartphones. Much of that popularity can be credited to its free-to-play Battle Royale mode, which, like other Battle Royales, has up to 100 players, duking it out across a vast open map that gets smaller over the course of a match. Its defining feature comes in the form of a building mechanic that lets players use gathered resources to build structures on the fly. This can be used for both defensive and offensive purposes, with advanced players being able to erect towering structures of all shapes and sizes in a matter of seconds. The newly introduced Zero Build mode seeks to reverse that, though, taking that aspect of its gameplay out of the equation to create something resembling a more traditional Battle Royale game. When it was first announced that the multiplayer portion of Halo Infinite would be completely free to play, many were stoked and skeptical at the same. But following a number of test flights and an early beta release, a lot of that skepticism was assuaged. The game was, quite simply put, quintessential Halo at its best. Players get the same AAA multiplayer shooter experience they've come to expect from the series, without any compromise to its overall quality. This is not to say that the game itself is perfect or free of problems, as there have been several, ranging from matchmaking issues to a lack of post-launch events. But considering that 343 Industries is committed to keeping the game going, with updates and downloadable content, we can rest assured that there will be plenty to keep players coming back for years to come.